Andrew, I appreciate you jumping on. I wanted to say congratulations for your first acquisition. You and your partner, Sean, and we'll get into a little bit more of the story behind there. But you guys have really been a great example of just tenacity and jumping over obstacles. No matter what got in your way, you were pushing it out of the way to get the deal done. So I loved how you guys went about getting that done. So why don't we start off a little bit with telling a little about your background. What did you do? Are you still working your 9 to 5? And then what type of deal that you got, and then we'll dive into the numbers after that.
Yeah, totally fine. So I still work my 9 to 5. Now, granted, I'm actually at the firm right now. So I'm remote from my 9 to 5, which I have the flexibility to do. But it's a different sector and industry. I'm actually in finance. I'm an FP&A professional. So I work in corporate finance for my W-2 employer. So it's kind of a natural progression into account. And that's really what drew us, myself and my partner, into this type of a deal is, he brought very specific strengths to the deal, as did I. And one of those was evaluating P&Ls, understanding different opportunities and profits and loss within there to really understand, does the deal make sense? And in our case, it absolutely did. That's kind of where we started.
Awesome. Good. How long did it take from start to finish for you guys to get your first deal done?
My partner and I, Sean, joined the group back in, it was right after Mother's Day. It was on Mother's Day when you and I chatted first. So
Yeah.
it was May. So
Yeah, I think it was May. Yeah, right
yeah,
towards the beginning. Yep.
yeah, right towards the beginning of May. So obviously joined the group very early, actively chatted and communicated with everyone, started networking with the group just to, hey, what are you about? What are we talking through? And then somebody had posted about partnering up, which happened to be my partner, Sean. So we connected, started chatting, and, it was a little bit of a sales pitch for me. And then he started pitching himself. It's like, okay, well, maybe here's an opportunity. He's, more of the entrepreneurial mindset, whereas I'm a little bit more of the conservative finance guy. He had a lot more capital to bring to the table, but I had a lot more time and operational expertise. We aligned that, yeah, we're probably a really good match and pair. And effectively, so we started both in May, and we closed October 27th on our deal. So a little over 6 months. I would say two out of the 6 months were spent deep diving into accounting, systems, and a couple other business verticals as well, but primarily space, chatting with different brokers, different things like that, looking for the ideal firm that we felt could be scalable for what we were trying to accomplish, knowing that there are different types of firms available. So we started chatting with the seller who sold us this business right here, starting in about July, and it took through July, August, September, October, almost 4 months to finally close that deal from time of outlook.
Yeah, no, I remember very vividly as from when you guys first joined, because back then the group was a lot smaller. Okay, great. So now let's talk about the deal that you got. So you bought an accounting firm. Let us know, okay, so what part of the country did you buy the accounting firm in? And then what was the size of the deal? What was the purchase price? And then what was the cash flow before you bought it with the loan? And we could talk about what the cash flow then looks like after debt payments.
We bought an accounting firm on the East Coast, specifically North Carolina area, South Carolina. The firm was originally priced at around $600,000.
Yeah.
The SBA in their valuation, just like any appraisal, gave their appraisal and valued the business around $750,000. So immediate, we'll call it equity in the business.
Yeah.
After meeting the seller, talking with the broker, we actually purchased the firm for $560,000. So we actually got a break, negotiated that down a little bit. So overall, a very, very good deal in terms of the price. In terms of the specifics, it was a single person accounting firm. So it was one CPA. We had 2 additional people, an admin and a payroll manager. That individual accountant was doing 1,300 tax returns. So, which if anyone knows accounting, you probably get around 600 tax returns per accountant. This guy was doing more than double that, on top of compilations, payroll, everything else that he did. So pretty insane. But the fortunate part of that is the firm had the volume and the SDE was over 40% because he was pocketing everything because all of his other expenses were very low. So us coming in, trying to be more passive owners, although myself, the first year I'm going to be our operations manager, I'm pulling a salary myself. In our cash flow models, we recognized very quickly that, the call it $400,000 that he was pulling in I can take his salary out, pay someone else, service our debts, pay myself, upgrade our software, and still come out with, let's call it 100,000 in SD at the end of year one, with minimal upgrades, but replacing one individual with two or three.
Yeah, that's awesome. And let's break that down a little bit more. So you were able to find an accounting firm. There was one main guy there. And with the amount of cash flow that that accounting firm had, with the loan that you took out from the SBA, from a SBA lender, you purchased the business. And after all is said and done, you're taking a salary as well. You are paying the debt. You are upgrading software, which is more of a cost. And even after all of that, there's still about 6 figures left, 100K, where, plus or minus, right in that ball range, that you are also going to be cash flowing on this business. And so
absolutely right.
And so I just want people to understand, and this is not a huge deal that was done, right? This was 550, right? So this is very much a small business. And one, they got it 200 grand, almost an initial equity in buying it at that price, which is awesome. And then they're also, after all is said and done, they're going to be making more than 100% cash on cash return, because they only really had to bring 10% to the deal on a 550. That's 55K plus or minus some closing costs. And on top of that, even with everything that Andrew mentioned, they're still walking away with around 100K after that. So a home run across the board. And the cool thing about this deal that you mentioned, Andrew, is that it was a owner that was working himself to the bone. And he's someone who was not really focused on building the business further because he just couldn't do it. He was maxed out. And so he was turning away business. And now you and your partner, Sean, coming into this, are able to build systems and processes to where that's kind of taking that yoke of burden is taken off of him, so that you guys can now, and I know just in the week or 2 weeks that you've owned it, that you already got new accounts coming on, right? Which is awesome. And so that's exactly what you want. You guys identified that opportunity there and you took it. So that was great on you guys. I love it. Okay, good. So now let's talk about more of the journey for you in why did you get interested in acquisitions in the first place? And then after that, how did Acquisition Ace, the group, how did that all help you throughout the process?
Where we live, we opted to put my son into private school just to help further his education. And my wife and I sat down and we decided that rather than penny pinching and saving, we wanted to grow our salaries. So rather than, asking for another raise or doing a different job search, let's figure out how to acquire a business. It was kind of the initial boom of, say the name, but Cody Sanchez, whatever. And, started blowing up the internet. We're like, okay, we're going to call all the ice machines. We're going to get an ice machine. And again, the numbers conservative guy is like, man, that it's a volume business. And the people who have the money have already done that, at least in our area, because we're in the South. And so, funny enough, she's on Instagram and started following this low name guy, Ben Kelly. And she's like, hey, I think he's actually onto something. True story. And she was like, I think you need to reach out to him. And it was on Mother's Day. And it was at her request that we initially called and chatted. And we're like, all right, you know what? We're interested in growing our wealth because we have additional expenses that we're going to start incurring. How do we do this? And we, very quickly after we chatted, we joined the group. I think it was like a day or two, had to get the paperwork and whatever else, joined the group and really actively started chatting. Met several individuals in the group, try to understand, hey, what's everyone looking at? What's everyone's thought process? How are we doing this? Again, being the finance guy, as you know from very early on in those calls, I'm looking at SIMs and the P&Ls. I'm like, oh, that seems strange. That doesn't. Not really sure. But other people are like, oh, there's a market for this. And if you change that, again, I don't have that expertise. But it was very, very clear early on that no one was looking to poach each other's deals and that everyone offered something very different to the table, either from operational expertise to financial acumen to overall business entrepreneurship. And that's what really kept me going in the group to understand I don't know what to do, but I'm willing to put faith in calling 5 brokers a day to understand, even if they're bad, just getting a callus built on my hands to understand what that looks like. And we absolutely did. And it's the first deal, but it won't be the last. And I'm really excited for future opportunities in the group.
Yeah. Awesome. No, that's, I remember the first time I met you and also your wife on the call.
Yeah, yeah,
going through that. And I remember that conversation. And I knew at the time there's definitely as many people as I've talked to now that have entered the group and others that have wanted to enter the group, but it didn't work out. I usually can tell within the first conversation or so, do they have what it takes to do
yeah,
it? And it's pretty accurate. And I could tell when I first had that conversation with you and your wife, and you guys had I could tell you set your minds to this being the thing that you wanted to go for and get done, and that you were going to do it. And you didn't, like you said, you didn't have acquisition experience. You didn't have anything that would give you an advantage over really anyone outside of your financial acumen, which definitely helps. But I knew that because you guys had set it in your mind that you were going to do it and you were doing it for the right reasons, that it would get done. And now here we are 6 months later,
right.
and the deal's done.
Yeah, crazy,
So
crazy.
yeah, and it is. It's insane. It's so cool when I get to look back and see people like yourself or people like, Zach Jensen, who's closing, and a couple others in the group that you know of. And you get to look back and see when they first started till now. And it's like, yeah, it's not surprising.
Yeah, yeah,
They're the ones who are pushing forward and making sure that they're going to make a change. And
yes.
so that's great. So what would you say then is what was your biggest obstacle throughout it? Because this is not an easy thing, as you can attest. It's not for the faint of heart. And I try to tell people that this is not a get rich quick scheme. This is not something where it's like, oh, it's a guarantee that you're going to walk away with a cash flowing business. It's a lot of hard work. And
Yeah.
what would you say to someone watching this who's kind of maybe interested in starting or learning more? What was some of those the obstacles that you had to overcome on this one?
I would say three obstacles. The first one is getting over the hurdle of just cold calling brokers and understanding. And again, like I said, building that callus. The first broker call that I had, the broker actually tried to sell me on his services and me paying him to find a deal. And my wife was like, "Oh, maybe we should do that." And I was like, "We called him to buy a business. Why are we giving him money? That doesn't make any sense."
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was those experiences that, we weren't prepared for, but we had to literally just build the callus to understand was the first obstacle and hurdle. The second one, transparently, was the SBA. In retrospect, a seller finance deal, we right now our debt payments around 7,800. And in talking with the seller, because we became pretty good friends, I was like, man, I could give you 8,000 out of our pocket, still, cash flow very easily, and we could be out of debt in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality was, we weren't thinking of it clearly. He had a very tight relationship with his broker who wanted money upfront right
Yep.
away. He wanted money. So pulling out more than 10% of that deal was hard. And so we had to do an SBA deal, unfortunately. And, they put us through the ringer. They asked us for a lot of things we weren't comfortable with. And both myself and my partner had to do things that we didn't necessarily want to collateralize or do. And, not to say we didn't have our stuff together, but I don't think we did. Lessons learned, unfortunately, but that was the second hardest thing. Third hardest thing was, again, we purchased a one owner operator. And building the plane while we're flying it, we didn't close up shop. We had to hire new people. We had to get new processes in place. This wasn't no, the wheels are on and running and you're just acquiring new owners, things of that nature. This was the turnaround and restructuring of the existing business. And we're still working through that. So I would say those three things were the biggest obstacles.
Yeah, those are good. And I want to touch on the SBA process as well, because it is not for the faint of heart, right? Obviously, they're offering 90% leverage, which is awesome.
It's great.
But that comes at a price. It comes at a price of being a major headache as you go through it. So it's one of those things as you're looking at a deal, you're going to look at all the different trade-offs, right? There's never a 100% solution. There's always just a trade-off. SBA gives you a lot of money, which is great. You can get big deals done that you couldn't normally get, but they're gonna want their piece of the pie. And so that's the part to do it. It's a great tool, but it's not something that should use on every deal. And seller financing can be hugely advantageous. And we have members in our group right now that are doing it. Sometimes it doesn't work. Most of the time it doesn't work, but sometimes it does. And it can be very powerful when it does. And so I think that was a good thing to bring up there with seller financing. What would you say then? I appreciate you kind of giving us your take on the deal and how you guys got it together and how you found it and everything else. If for someone who's just thinking like they're kind of like where you were 6 months ago, and they're like, yeah, I think this is an area where I want to build wealth. What would that be piece of advice you would give them as they are about to start this journey?
So the biggest piece of advice is identify your strength. What are you good at? Not what you're interested in or what your hobby is, because the skill set that you bring to the table will help define what type of role, company, and opportunity that you go after. For myself, being in finance, it makes sense for us to look at accounting firms because I can hit the ground running very quickly and either identify opportunities for someone who's maybe a people person. Again, you don't want to go into an accounting or technical trade if your strength is something that is not. So identify that strength and how you would fit into that company you would be acquiring, because that's really how you want to make it not a job, but a career, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the biggest thing for us is how do I actually enjoy what I'm doing as an entrepreneur and a business owner now, rather than a W-2 employee for a company that is paying my bills.
Yeah, exactly. No, those are great words of advice there, Andrew. And like I said, I super appreciate your take on this, your hard work, and it's been awesome getting to know you. I can't wait to see what you do next, and you and Sean, whether you do it together as partners or you continue to do it on your own. But yeah, super excited to see you guys and what you've been able to do. I appreciate your time here today, and I hope that you have I want to keep you back from jumping into back to your business and getting everything settled. So we'll go from there.
Good. Cool. Well, thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right. Have a great night, Andrew.